To survive is to live, to exist. To thrive is to grow, to prosper. Most people today have a limited belief. They're afraid to change. I want to tell you how to go to thrive. Hi, my name is Bill Grimm, personal coach, business consultant, and speaker. Most recently, I was the Chief Operating Officer of the Cannery Road Company, a development retail company in Northern California. In the past, I worked as a franchise executive and negotiated many multi-million-dollar deals with global brands in my 30-plus year career. Before I talk about thriving, I want to share a story with you about surviving, or more particularly, survival, with a little bit of humor. My first job after college was working in a research and development lab in Chicago. As a chemist, I developed products that were placed in Sears stores nationwide. So my recommendations could mean multi-million-dollar deal to a given supplier. There was a major chemical supplier that invited me to join them on a fishing trip to a remote lake in northern Canada. The fishing was so plentiful that after the first day, it got boring. We were two to a boat, and there were 3 boats on this remote lake. So on the second day, my partner Jim, who worked for the chemical company, had an idea. He said, Bill, let's go find out where this lake joins the adjacent lake. Jim had a few beers and was in a joyful mood. So with Jim at the engine, we started exploring. And as we got close, I could hear the sound of rushing water, like a waterfall. And Jim said something to me, but I didn't hear him because of the rushing water noise. So I asked Jim, I said, Jim, what did you say? And we were moving slowly across a rocky side. He said, Bill, the engine died. I wanted you to grab that branch. Well, that branch he wanted me to grab was to hold the boat so it stopped floating, going over the waterfall in the adjacent lake. It was past us. So at this point, we realized we're going to be going over the waterfall. So we hit the deck, laid down flat. Jim starts saying the Hail Mary, and Our Father, and praying that God takes care of his family. He was convinced we were not going to survive. Well, we went over the falls, the boat's turning, twisting, banging, but we never turned over, never tipped over. We landed about 200 feet into the adjacent lake and got caught by a couple of rocks. By a miracle, we survived. We stepped out of the boat, pulled it to a branch alongside the bank, and tied it up. Our plan was to leave the boat, so I grabbed a knife, Jim took an expensive camera, and we start walking. There was no path, so we had to walk very carefully, each step being careful. We stepped on a stone to make sure it was solid. And eventually we reached a plateau. We momentarily stopped. And as we stopped, I looked down near my feet, and there was steaming bear droppings. I looked to my left, and about 15 feet away was a 3-foot diameter cave. Yikes. I tapped Jim on the shoulder and I whispered. Jim's response was, give me the knife. Well, out of respect to my elders, I gave Jim the knife. Now, what Jim really meant by that was, Bill, I'm your host today, and you will be the bear's meal today, not me. So we slowly and quietly walked away. We survived. We eventually got back to the cabin, and while I share this story with you with humor, it's a day in my life that I'll never forget. Let's talk a little bit about thriving. One thing I learned in business is that a business cannot survive without a strategy to thrive. There's 3 critical skills I want to share with you today that form the foundation of a business and a person to thrive even when you're up against some real challenges. The first skill is resiliency. It's the ability to deal with a crisis successfully. Secondly is vision. It's the ability to plan your future, but with wisdom. And finally, there's networking. In this digital age, it's important that we interact with as many people as possible, exchange information. You need to expand your network. Let me share a story from my personal experience of how I utilize each of these 3 skills. My first story is about resiliency. I was born on a dairy farm and raised on a dairy farm in Wisconsin. My father died when I was 2 years old. He was killed crossing the street by a drunk driver in Green Bay. It put undue pressure in our everyday life. We had pigs, chickens, ducks, turkeys, and 40 milking cows. Each had to be taken care of twice daily, 7 days a week. In addition, I suffered from severe migraine headaches and had a major eczema problem. In fact, it took 200 shots of different chemistries in my arm to determine that I was allergic to my favorite sweet, chocolate. And my worst enemy, barn dust. So I had many emotionally and challenging days in my youth. But what saved me and was a tremendous help was sports. During the little free time I had, I would practice sports. One of the sports I really enjoyed was baseball. And in grade school, I became the pitcher, and I pitched our team to win the championship. I was successful in numerous sports in high school. In my freshman year in college, I made the all-conference first team in basketball. I won 2 league most valuable player awards and batting titles playing semi-pro baseball during the summer months. So it was a combination of sports with my challenging youth that I learned resiliency. Now everybody has a story about being resilient, but without resiliency, you cannot thrive. Let's talk about vision. I'm going to share with you a story that most people wouldn't share because it didn't turn out like they liked. I was on the board of directors of a Los Angeles hospital, generated about $55 million in annual revenue. I was responsible for working with the chief financial officer to ensure that our finances were managed correctly. Well, the board decided not to renew the contract of the existing chief executive officer, and they approached me and asked me if I would be willing to become the interim chief executive officer. I said, absolutely. I immediately went to work. I negotiated the purchase of an adjacent office building, and I managed the construction of a new $23 million hospital because FEMA closed our hospital as a result of an earthquake damage caused by the Northridge earthquake in 1994. I was convinced I was going to be the next CEO. Everybody recommended me, and the board even received a letter from the hospital doctors recommending me. Well, the board felt different. They were looking for somebody that had medical experience, not management and leadership background. So I had to develop a new vision for myself. I resigned. Now I got some reassurances by senior executives from the Kaiser Hospital and Cedars-Sinai Hospital who wanted me to stay in the healthcare industry. But I had to move on and to create a new vision for myself. So the lesson here is, when your vision doesn't work out, create a new vision and set new goals. but you need vision in life to thrive. My final story has to do with networking. I was on the executive committee of the International Mass Retail Association, along with senior executives from Walmart and Target, amongst others. I had this idea to take Baskin-Robbins ice cream stores and place them inside Walmart Supercenter stores, just beyond the checkout. And so I pitched the idea of franchise expansion and got an invitation to go to the Bentonville, Arkansas headquarters. And there I made great connections. So we launched this test in Atlanta, opened up a couple stores, and ultimately we found that few people, as you're finishing your checkout with a full cart of groceries, don't want to buy ice cream. You just want to go home. But through these connections, I networked. And I did a deal with Dunkin' Donuts, which led to a deal with California Pizza Kitchen, which led to a deal with Gloria Jean's Coffees as an officer of a publicly traded company, and which led to a deal with the Canterbury Road Company as a chief operating officer. You need to network to achieve thriving. Let's talk about the most important skill. It's called attitude. I think philosopher William James said it best, quote, "The greatest discovery of any generation is a human being altering their life by altering their attitude," end of quote. This came into play in 2020. As the chief executive officer of Canterbury Road Company, his COVID environment at the key, we had lots of challenges. I had to renegotiate over 100 leases, move new tenants in, and move tenants around. My vision was to keep the tenants and retain the company financially strong and not lay off a single employee. There were many long hours, 14, 16-hour days. I'm proud to say that we achieved a 95% occupancy and didn't furlough or lay off a single employee. In my career, I became pretty good at analyzing business deals. Deals aren't easy, they can be very challenging. And there's 3 questions you need to answer as you get into analyzing a deal. First, you need to understand the financials of the business to see not only if they can survive, but can they thrive. And for a bigger corporation, not only do you need to understand their financials, you need to understand their pro forma and their budget. Secondly, you need to know if the leadership and the people are capable of growing the company. This is true of a small business as well as a large corporation. And finally, you need to understand the competition. What's the business sector that the company is dealing in? How do they differentiate their business from the competition? Or a key marketing objective is, what is the unique selling proposition? Everyone has had challenges in their life, but the ability to go from surviving to thriving is available to every person and every business. Sometimes you need an extra push to get where you need to be. My achievements are a result of my resiliency, my vision, my networking, but above all, my attitude. Remember, a bad attitude is like a flat tire. You don't get anywhere until you replace it. Oh, by the way, one other thing. Stay away from the bears.